Henry Olsen is with us this morning. He is a columnist at the Washington Post, background in political analysis, but also as a bonus for us in law. And he's in Washington this morning. Welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me.
The impeachment managers wrapped up their arguments around 7:30 last night, but I think it is still reverberating, the images and the sounds from that video, some of which had never been heard before. Can you speak to the power of it, Henry, and the effect that it had?
Yeah, I think it shook a lot of people. There are lots of reports that senators came up to the brink of tears, people who were obviously emotionally riveted back to those scary moments. And I think it will continue to have an effect not only on the Republican senators, but on public opinion as a whole.
Well, that takes me into a whole other area that I was going to get to, but you've read that. I mean, obviously this is about trying to get a conviction from the impeachment manager side of things of Donald Trump. But knowing that they're unlikely to get that, there's also something else going on, I would suspect, in terms of how they are presenting it, and that is for the people watching. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, not just the people watching in the sense of Democrats and Biden supporters, because those people have always been for impeachment and conviction. It's looking to Republicans that if what you see is Republicans beginning to say, okay, we need to move away from this man. He shouldn't have been convicted, but we don't want to have him lead our country again. That would be a bonus, that if they can't get conviction in the Senate, they can make it politically impossible for him to run again. And I think they're aiming for that as well.
That's interesting. They're hearing reports, I was reading this morning, that thousands of Republicans are leaving their membership of the Republican Party. So, again, part of what you're talking about right there. Back to what's happening, though, in terms of the people who are listening who will eventually vote on all of this. The rawness of the video, the power of the video seems to be without dispute. But have the impeachment managers succeeded in making the link between the words of Donald Trump and the actions of the rioters?
If I were them, I would spend most of today doing that. That I would kind of pose a hypothetical, which is to say, if Trump didn't intend this, why didn't he do this? If, to try and prove a case by the lack of proof of the opposite, why, if Trump didn't whip them up, why were they there? Why were they wearing Trump gear? There's this whole series of circumstantial evidence. The Republicans are demanding more direct proof, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence in what he said, in how the protesters and the rioters referred to themselves, and what Trump didn't do in those key hours that if I were the House managers, I would be making today. And that would establish the link stronger than they did yesterday.
Interesting. Many people are watching Mitch McConnell in all of this, probably you are too, who is not pressuring Republican senators to acquit and has indicated this should be a vote of conscience. What will he do you think?
What do I think he will do? I have no inside knowledge, so I want to preface with that. I think he's going to vote to convict, and I think he's going to delay his announcement of that until after the trial. But anyone who's watched McConnell sees that he is doing things he's never done before and making public statements. He's usually operating behind the scenes to corral the votes. I think this is a man who's going to convict and make a very emotional and powerful speech when he announces it.
That will be something to watch and wait for if indeed that comes to pass, as you suspect it might, because many people watching and listening, again, the arguments that the impeachment managers have created and crafted to this point, wonder how senators can listen and not acquit based on what they're hearing. How will history judge them, do you think?
I think history has a very long arc. And how we might think it will be written the day after something happens would be very different from how it might be viewed a number of years from now. I think that right now, though, obviously the people who vote to convict on the Republican side will be lauded as heroes in the media and by the establishments in the United States. But the real battle is going to be for the hearts and minds of Republican voters. And that's something that only begins when the trial ends, not something that will be ended. And that, I think, will have a very large part to play in how history ultimately judges the outcome of this trial.
I read somebody's comment, and I thought it was quite striking that perhaps in time, history will regard the insurrectionist senators as history now regards segregationist senators.
I think that's way too much of a brush at this point. I think that what we're looking at is a small number of senators. When you say insurrectionist senators, I assume you mean the people who challenged the results and consequently brought about the possibility that the Electoral College vote would not be certified. I think that's a partisan view, and I think that while their political futures are very much in doubt, it's not the same as segregation. Segregation or racism was a vile, evil act, and I think a number of those Republican senators were acting out of conscience and not in any thought that this would lead to a violent revolution.
So what will you be watching for today specifically, Henry?
What I'll be looking for today specifically is how do they tie the video that we saw, and how do we tie that in a way to President Trump that is compelling. Again, that they're making the argument indirectly, but they really need to make it forcefully. I think if I were them, I would have videos and tweets that show how Trump specifically targeted these members, how he spread these lies. I think if I were them, I would even go back to the debate where with Chris Wallace, where he specifically says that the Proud Boys should stand down, given their strong involvement in the most violent aspects of the riot. I would say, if he didn't think this could happen, why did he do that? Again, I would make a very strong circumstantial case that the president, in the back of his mind, was aware that this was a possibility and was not willing to, and was actually willing to countenance it. That's the case I would make if they make it. I think that's something that over the weekend, as Republican senators go home and think about their votes, they'll have to weigh very carefully.
Henry Olsen, a pleasure to meet you on the program. Thank you for your insight with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.